Hello again, AP Psychology students. Welcome back to class. Today we're going to continue on our look at intelligence, and you guys are watching this brief video that'll be about 10 minutes before then, as a class, watching the documentary called Battle of the Brains. This documentary is an interesting look. Here's a picture of the beginning of it, at a couple different people that are competing at different intelligence tests, both kind of the standard IQ test as well as some alternative ways to maybe measure different types of intelligence if we're going off of like Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory. And it's kind of a cool little take on what IQ tests mean. You get to see interviews of different people that are psychologists that have gotten different theories on intelligence. Some of the names you might recognize from some of our lecture notes. So it's a cool little documentary. It's a little bit older, but it is still worthwhile to watch it. There is going to be a worksheet that goes with this assignment that as you watch together as a class, you are not going to be completing the whole thing. Next Monday, when I come back, you guys will be watching the rest of it together as a class and finishing it up. Today, most likely, you're going to get through definitely number 3, maybe number 4. But that's probably the extent of it through today. That'll be about the first 20-ish minutes of the documentary, and then the rest of it we'll watch later. But what this video is going to go through first, before we get to having you guys watch that, is a few more slides of notes. So if you are taking notes by hand, you can pull out a notebook, pause the video if you need to still, pull out a notebook, and then follow along here as we go through this question of the day, which is what actually is being measured on standard IQ tests, and what does an IQ test even mean, especially when we consider that there's so much diversity in terms of different people's abilities. And sometimes certain things are just not quantifiable on an IQ test. And so we're going to just have a brief conversation about that. There's 2 main slides that we're going to go through today, and then we'll turn it over to the full class TV up front to watch the documentary. So follow along here, and here we go. So yesterday in class, if you watched the previous video, we learned about what intelligence tests look like, kind of a standard IQ test. And we talked about the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale as well as the Stanford Binet. And then you guys took an online version that was supposed to simulate what one of those looked like. So hopefully you got an okay score. If you didn't, again, don't worry too much. Don't put too much emphasis into it, because those weren't necessarily standardized or valid. Some of these different things that we looked at on here, because you're taking it online, it's just comparing your score to an online database of what a right answer is, but it's not a standardized test that's been normed to 100, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. It was meant to just give you a sense of what IQ tests look like. Okay, so again, today we're going to talk a little bit about different other aspects of what's actually being measured on IQ tests, and what does it actually mean when you consider diverse ability levels. So the first 2 terms here on this slide are 2 types of intelligence that were studied and found to be kind of 2 different skill sets that are required on most standard IQ tests. So what we call crystallized versus fluid intelligence. And crystallized intelligence is kind of like semantic memory, if you remember that from earlier in this unit. Semantic memory was the knowledge of facts and details. Crystallized intelligence is along the same lines here. It's your accumulation of knowledge of certain facts and verbal skills that we have over time. So knowing, for example, what the capital of Argentina is, which you may or may not know, Buenos Aires. That is a semantic memory. It is a piece of crystallized intelligence that you have in your head or you don't have in your head. So when you guys took those IQ tests, some of it came down to, do you know what this word means? And if you don't know what that word means, or a synonym for that word or the opposite of that word, you're not going to get it right, right? And it's just a fact that you would learn an association with certain terminology. That's crystallized intelligence. And a big emphasis on a lot of IQ tests is that. Another element on IQ tests that you guys took was fluid intelligence. And this is more about abstract reasoning. So this is more along the lines of the types of questions you saw that were about like those progressive matrices, where it was said what pattern comes next. If you had like a grid of 9 different shapes and it's trying to say what shape comes next, that would speak more towards your fluid intelligence. And this is more about being able to see patterns, see abstract connections and reasoning, the speed of thought that comes with it. Now, interestingly, if you compare these 2 things, crystallized and fluid intelligence, they're not linear in terms of the overall effect on our cognitive abilities. So you've probably heard it is the case that as we get older, at a certain age, our cognitive abilities start to slow down. But if you actually look at the difference between crystallized and fluid intelligence, it's not the same. crystallized intelligence, this idea of knowledge of facts and details, right? So knowing terms and vocab and verbal skills, that continues to increase. That's the blue line here. That just continues to go up as we reach our 50s, 60s, 70s. It's really the fluid intelligence, our speed of thought, our abstract reasoning, our ability to see patterns and make connections, that starts to take a dip basically from ages 30 onwards. So, you hit age 30, that's kind of like your peak year, late 20s, early 30s. And then from that point onward, most of us start to see cognitive and physical declines that take place. And so, crystallized versus fluid intelligence, just another way of thinking about what type of stuff is on a IQ test. Both are important when it comes to intelligence testing. Which one should be more important? Should you just know tons of stuff versus be able to see abstract connections? Different people can have different opinions on that, but different test manufacturers have to balance these things about what truly makes someone intelligent and smart. Is it about the stuff they know, or is it about being able to see abstract reasoning play out and patterns emerging? So, anyways, so that's crystallized versus fluid intelligence. One other slide here. So, whenever we talk about IQ tests, it is worth acknowledging that clearly there are certain abilities that are not showing up on these IQ tests. We already talked about this a little bit when we looked at like Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. And a lot of the IQ tests that you guys took are basic math abilities, vocab, English abilities, reasoning, problem solving. But there are other skill sets that just don't show up. And some people do have these extraordinary abilities that really won't show up on an IQ test. And so, two terms to give you a sense of these type of individuals, we call them prodigies and savants. Both of these would have either a kind of average or low level of intelligence, but they would be off the charts in some sort of specific ability level. So, what a prodigy is, sometimes we use this term, a child prodigy, is an individual who is going to score at an average level of intelligence. They're going to be within probably one standard deviation above and below the mean, so somewhere between like 85 to 115 score. But they are not, even though they have that average intelligence, they are going to have some sort of ability that would not show up on the IQ test that is uh, amazing and outstanding. So there are like art prodigies that are really gifted with artwork, but that's not going to show up on an IQ test. Or musical prodigies. In the documentary we're going to be watching here in a little bit, The Battle of the Brains, one of the people they have on the show is a musical prodigy. That's part of this competition of who's got the best brain. And he's going to be average when it comes to your standard intelligence test, but he became like a world famous composer by the age of like 14 or something like that. And so that's an example of a prodigy. Average intelligence, massive, amazing ability in one specific area. A savant, sometimes also called savant syndrome, is different in the sense that it's actually someone with low levels of intelligence. If they were to take a standard IQ test, they would get a low score. They would be considered cognitively disabled in some ways. But when it comes to one specific ability, again, they're going to be off the charts. And so this is where you kind of get that blending of severe mental disorder, or disability rather, cognitive disability, while also having a very impressive gift and ability in another area. So examples of this, maybe you've seen, this one is a common one that I talk with students. Cody Lee, who is a musician, he was on America's Got Talent a few years ago. He's got he's on the autism spectrum. I think he's also blind, some cognitive disabilities. But when it comes to singing and playing the piano, he's very, very good at it. That would be an example of the savant syndrome. If you've seen the movie, which you probably haven't because it's very old, but it's called Rain Man. Rain Man is a reference to the ability of this guy over here on the right, who is cognitively disabled, but he's incredibly gifted at math. This guy in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, he has an eidetic memory or photographic memory. Anything he visually sees in his mind, he's able to recreate in drawing form. So this is him redrawing Mexico City as they flew over it in a helicopter. But in interactions with him, he is cognitively disabled and I think also on the autism spectrum disorder. And so it's interesting that this exists, right? That you could have a brain capacity to get such a low IQ score, but at the same time have these unique abilities. It just goes to show that with intelligence testing, it's only so valuable, right? We can make some predictions about it, what it means to have a high IQ versus a low IQ, but there are all of these outliers in intelligence. Okay. So speaking of a high or low score, when you get a high score on the IQ test, there's a term that we called, which is called gifted. So we use this term to refer to education, like individuals. We used to call it TAG program, talented and gifted. Now I think we call it an advanced learner. And it really is just kind of a measure. If you put someone through an IQ test, are they mildly above, like kind of 2 standard deviations above, right? Above that 1 standard deviation, 115 to 130. Moderately would be 2 standard deviations above, or highly or profound. And profound is really when you're getting into this terminology of genius category. Excuse me. So an intellectual disability, on the other hand, is going to be on the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to IQ scores. This is going to be an individual that has below a 70 or below. So that would be more than 2 standard deviations below, 2 standard deviations below or more. And depending on the individual, this could be caused by a number of different things. One such example would be like Down syndrome. Now, Down syndrome is again a spectrum in terms of how profound or severe some of the cognitive disabilities might be, but caused by extra chromosomes, extra copy of the 21st chromosome. An individual with Down syndrome might also have certain cognitive abilities, but it really is a range of spectrums. Some people would have Down syndrome but still have a higher IQ than individuals that don't have Down syndrome and just have a lower IQ. And there are other cognitive disabilities that sometimes come with other neurocognitive disabilities, whether we're talking something on the autism spectrum or otherwise. But again, it sometimes shifts the other way. Certain individuals on the autism spectrum disorder have very high levels of intelligence, and it kind of depends on the individual. So again, it goes back to this idea, does the IQ test really tell us anything? Now, to answer that question, to some degree, I mean, we're going to hear from a number of different psychologists debating this on this documentary here at Battle of the Brains. So what we're going to do now is, once this video is over, and I told the sub to take about 15-ish minutes to let you guys watch this video right now, we will then be engaging in watching this video all together on the front here called Battle of the Brains. This worksheet, there's paper copies of it that is accessible that the sub can give you, and you can grab one of those if you want it. Otherwise, you can find this on Google Classroom. Battle of the Brains is going to be under Unit 5 here. We're only going to be watching the first like 20-25 minutes max in class here. Next Monday, we'll finish it up, the other 25 minutes or so. It's about 40-45 minutes long, the Battle of the Brains documentary. And just follow along here and answer the question we go. Like I said, it's a pretty interesting take on what intelligence actually means. And they put some very highly skilled, impressive people to task, trying to get them to compete on these different things. So you're just going to fill out part of this today, and that'll be it for this weekend. Next Monday, we'll carry on with this. One last reminder before I leave you here. Don't forget this assignment from yesterday, the IQ test reflection questions. You took one of these 2 online IQ tests. Answer the questions that follow. That is due for today. I probably won't be looking at it until next Monday. So just make sure that this gets in at some point as early as you can as well. So email me if you have any questions. Hopefully you guys are finding this learning still enjoyable and interesting, even though it's over video. And I'll be back on Monday for us to catch up and carry on with intelligence. Thanks.